Welcome and thank you for joining. While we are waiting for more attendees to join in the Zoom room, I will wait for another 30 seconds before we officially start. And meanwhile, if you have any questions during the presentation, and if you have any technical issues, you can always put in the Q&A box or the chat function at the bottom of the Zoom window. Okay, welcome again. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Our webinar's topic is how your organization can benefit from integrated business planning. And we are so happy to have Ralph Stein, Solution Architect Financial Reporting Applications from CCH Tagetik. And he's currently the Solution Architect Financial Reporting Applications and specializing in the ESG reporting and supply chain process across Asia Pacific. And before I pass over to him, I just need to go over a few logistics. I mentioned earlier, our webinar is recording. We're recording the webinar. After the our webinar, if you need our recording, you can contact me. I can share with you. We are upgrading our ASCI, the ASCII system. So in the future, we will have everything on the website available. But meanwhile, you have to contact me and I can share the recording with you or your colleagues. I'm sure you all are familiar with the Zoom function, but I just have to repeat in case you are not that sure. Throughout the presentation, you can always ask questions and Ralph is happy to answer. What you can do is you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom window, or you can just put in the chat. Either way is fine. You just let us know if you have any questions or if you have any technical issues. For example, if you have difficulties seeing the presentation or hearing from us, or there is some background noise, just let us know and we will make sure we can have a smooth webinar. What I would like to remind is you can always let us know if you have questions, and if we have too many questions and we are not able to answer them all in the webinar, we will follow up with you. We have your email address, so Ralph and his team will follow up and make sure your questions are answered. So please let us know if you have any questions. I am assuming everyone can hear us because there's nothing in the chat and no complaint in the Q&A box. So I will pass over to you, Ralph, and you can start the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to present to you. My name is Ralph Stein and I work for Wolters Kluwer. CCH Tagetik is one of the divisions within Wolters Kluwer. They actually have 5 divisions. One is in tax and accounting, finance, which is where we are, medical, risk, and legal. So today's focus is going to be on the integrated business plan. Let's get here. So we're going to do a brief introduction about what is IBP and why is IBP needed now, and some of the benefits for the CFOs and what you need to look out for in an expert solution. So what is integrated business planning? It's where we can actually look at the data from sales, finance, supply chain, marketing, IT, and human resources into the one environment. So while, as one of my colleagues has said, you've got most people these days wear a smartwatch, which give you an indication of the health and how your body's going and everything like that. This is how integrated business planning helps an organization do that, by working and saying, okay, if we have a change in our marketing, how's that impacting our sales? And if it's impacting our sales, how does that impact our finance? What do we need to make sure from a supply chain, both supply and demand perspective, we're able to meet those new sales? Do we need to have any IT impacts on that? So for example, if we use Black Friday as a example, you've got all the webs being hit very hard with this extra sales due to the discount. So you're going to make sure that your web environment stays up and is able to accept that. And that sort of comes into IT. then you need to make sure that you've either pre-Black Friday, you had the right human resources to do the production planning and make sure that you have the ordering or the supply chain to make sure you actually have the necessary details to meet that. So it gives you a way to link in all the different areas and have a very integrated view without having things in individual silos, which makes it hard to work through. So the IBP helps the business align its goals and its targets with decisions across the entire organization, which needs to be looked at from both a strategical perspective, but also an operational and a IT strategic perspective. So who drives the integrated business planning process? Well, it's done in a number of different areas. You've got the business strategy being defined by the C-level, and that, as you know, covers normally the next 2 to 3 years. You then have the financial impact of those strategies and how that translates into the executable financial plans and what needs to be taken into account when doing those. And then, of course, you've got the operational plans. How are you going to ensure that the business operations can meet the necessary details to do the achieve those strategic operations. So this is where the integrated business plan links all those details together and gives the organization a way of doing that. So in today's environment, supply chain and the CFO are working very closely together to ensure that they can give the organization the necessary underlying ability to operate efficiently and provide the right strategic decisions, right strategic information to the organization. So basically have in most cases the supply chain being elevated, because you've got the issues that we have seen with COVID where, for example, we've got one customer we've been talking to recently and they've been saying how one of the biggest issues they've got at the moment is getting hold of pallets to enable them to send their goods out to the market. So all these things need to be taken into account to ensure that not only the supply chain can be achieved, but also the necessary linkages back to the financials. So these need, in order for them to operate efficiently and together, you need to ensure that you can drive additional value from the CFO perspective. You can sharpen the predictions and ensuring that when you see a change in one part of the organization, e.g. marketing, you can understand the flow-on impacts to the other parts of the organization, as I was talking about earlier. And therefore, you also need to increase your financial efficiencies, because with the linkages, you can also see, oh, where can we do things better and how can we make sure that these things are taken into account going down into the future for our operations. And then from a supply chain perspective, we need to make sure we increase our operational efficiencies, right? To make sure that we can look at how things are being done and we can look at saying, okay, we know that we need this particular product to be here for Black Friday because we're giving it a, say, a 20% decrease. And we know that's going to, in price, which is going to increase the number of sales by, say, 30%. So we need to make sure that we have got sufficient supply of the raw materials, or if we buy it as a finished goods, that we've actually got it here on hand to meet the demand. And we're not going to be saying, oh, sorry, we can't sell you that because we're out of stock, because of the cost to the organization, not only in lost sales, but also in reputation. If we say that we can sell something and then we don't have the product there to meet that. By also linking the integrated business plan across the organization, you look at increasing the resiliency of the organization and minimizing the risk of stockouts, but also of being able to not have the necessary information on hand to provide it to the finance people about what the costs are, what the necessary information is. And also you can look at minimizing risk by looking at your inventory levels and making sure that you keep them to a minimum and not overstock. And whether that's sometimes being able to look at saying, okay, in the past, we usually went straight external if we needed something, and we always bought it external, where with an integrated business plan, you can also look and say, okay, we've got 3 or 4 warehouses. If we've got an overstock in one warehouse and understock in another, and we can actually migrate it between those different warehouses to ensure we're providing an efficient use of our inventory levels and not making extra orders when we have got overstocking in another place. And also, of course, identify the full financial impact, because with understanding how your revenue is going to go you need to also understand the implications on your cost, and you also need to understand what the delivery timeframes are and all the different areas that you know exist around the supply chain planning from both supply chain and demand planning perspective. So the result of aligning these new roles drives more informed and better decision by making the ability to integrate the data between all the different areas, aligning the strategic decisions, so you can actually ensure that when you walk into a meeting with the different areas, everybody's talking from the same song sheet, which means that the organisation is going to prosper because they're all have the same strategic ideas and strategic goals, which enables the business to become more profitable and reduce the risk to the operations overall. And also driving efficiencies by ensuring that the different areas are talking to each other and ensuring communications are reporting the latest details, because as you know, if one area is not communicating with another, they might say, okay, for example, marketing's going out and doing a big push for Black Friday, but they're not telling the supply chain people, or they're not telling finance about this area, and therefore they don't take that into account in their advertising costs or whatever, and therefore your overall impacts to the business could be actually a reduction in your marketing benefits because of those things not being there and being ready for that operation. No questions yet? Okay, I'll keep talking. So an integrated business planning aligns the entire organization. As I was saying, it stops organizations focusing on just one area, because with an integrated business plan, you also have to look at not only the budget and planning and forecasting from a finance perspective and how that impacts on the cash flow, but you also need to look from, if you're, for example, having an increase in production, you might need to forecast some actual capital expenses to make sure that you can achieve those production levels, whether it is extra machinery or better machinery, or you might need extra trucks if you're a transport company to ensure that you can meet the necessary impacts of those strategic decisions. You also need to look at your workforce planning and how that impacts not only on your budget and your cash flow, but also on your actual staffing levels, because you might find that to meet the demand, you might actually have to put on a whole extra shift. Are you, in the current environment, are you going to be able to get those extra people because of the problems we're having in today's environment, getting the staff when we need them? Then you've got your production and cost planning control. Now, even if you're importing the finished goods, you've got to make sure that you can actually work with the company that's producing them to ensure they can meet your deadlines, and then you can also ensure that the data, or the product is shipped to you in the necessary time to be here in time for the Black Friday sales, for example, or for the Christmas sales. So you need to actually have control over that and ensure that you're not only going out and buying things, but for example, if you're doing your supply chain, you need to ensure that if you're ordering a container from overseas, you've got the ability to see, okay, currently we're ordering 3/4 of a container. We know that these two products are one of our best sellers, so we'll actually bump them up a little bit and order a bit more now. And yes, that will give you a higher cost, which will flow through to your cash flow and your budget in your inventory, but it will actually mean that you're actually filling up a container. And with the expense of the containers at the moment, as you all know, and I was quite amazed when somebody at a tyre, like Bob Jane, told me that pre-COVID it used to cost around $2,500 to get a container load of tyres, and now it's nearly up at $14,000. So you need to make sure that you're getting the true benefit of those information from the suppliers, and that's where of course your production is linked into your supply chain planning to ensure that you can get things delivered on time and with the right quantities to meet your necessary things. And all that comes into your macro business planning, because as they all are linked together, it means that you can then look at what the impacts of one area has on the other and ensure that the flows are taken into account. So how do we do that? From a process perspective, we focus on the financial performance. You need to look at both your short and long-term plans and make sure that the strategic plans covers both of those, and that will then impact on your revenue planning, and then revenue impacts on cash flow and revenue together with OPEX and CAPEX to your balance sheet. So all, as you can see, all these different areas are, from a finance perspective, are interrelated. And of course, the production cost of planning, as we know, especially with electricity costs going up in Australia, that also has an impact on the overall profitability of the business. So you might need to look at smarter ways of doing it, or smarter ways. Is there any other ways you can get your electricity? So some companies we've been hearing about from who are actually going and putting solar on, and then looking at putting in shipping containers of batteries to actually make sure they can capture their electricity that they're capturing from the solar panels to reduce their overall operational costs. So again, that would have a big capital injection at the moment, but then hopefully overall it gives you a lot longer benefit in your reduction in your production costs from a reduction in energy costs. And then of course your procurement and cost of goods sold, like how long is it taking to procure something? Some places that we've heard of pre-COVID, it used to take only a month or two to get the goods to Australia, but now with the shipping delays and the lack of production in some places in China due to their COVID strategy, you're looking at sometimes 3 to 4 months to get those goods. So you really need to make sure that you take into account your supply planning into that account when you look at your procurement impacts. And then you've also got to look on how you're going to, from an operational excellence perspective, how that's going to impact on your sale and services, your demand planning, your supply, your MEIO, and your network, because you might need to re-look at how you're currently getting your goods, because you might need to change that to ensure that in the current environment, it might be maybe more efficient to get it from a second supplier than your current supplier because of the production delays they're encountering or the shipping costs. So you might find that there's somewhere in Australia that can actually produce it. They might be a bit more expensive on a per unit basis, but when you take into account the time delay, the shipping costs, and everything else, it might be a break-even point. So where in the past you didn't really need to look around as much, in today's environment with the different cost challenges that are being faced, especially with inflation all around the world, you might need to reassess how that's happening and the impact that plays on the organisation and its strategic and supply plans. So the combination of these two items will help you become a fully aligned enterprise. You're looking at both your life cycle and your assortment. So a lot of people are focused on, for example, ESG reporting at the moment, and they're looking at how life cycle or the circular economy can look at impact their products and what they can do in that environment. They're also aligning it with SO&P. You need to, as I said, align it with your IT and support planning to make sure that any changes can actually be reflected across the organisation and captured in that area. And of course, your capacity planning, right? Because if you're expecting things to go up in price, and you need to look at how it's going to impact your capacity to produce things, and also what you can do to, if some costs are going up, are there other costs that you have got the capability to either control or reduce to ensure that you don't have too much of an impact on your own sales price, because as you know, that will also could impact on your sales overall. So having an integrated business plan that's using AI-based predictive intelligence provides the ability to look at things from a different point of view. You can also look at things from an overall point of view, saying, okay, this is what the sales people are saying, this is what the supply people are saying, this is what the demand people are saying, and this is how it's going to impact our production plan, this is how it impacts our inventory levels, and this is what we can maybe do to impact those different areas, and what's the flow-on effect. So you need to be able to cover all those areas to ensure that you're looking at the best item from an overall operational perspective. So why do you need IBP now? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Finance in a lot of large organizations is incorporating operations, right? So for example, that needs you to be able to look at information both across those areas, and you need to take into account the strategic portion of it to ensure that you look at what's happening across those areas. You also have supply chain becoming important, as we were saying, especially with COVID, where we had a lot of out of stock, and especially, for example, in toilet paper in Australia. But you also had other areas where you had stock issues, and that was purely due to the supply chain having problems. And then the biggest thing that's driving it is technology. right? Today, we've got advancements in technology with AI and the ability to integrate data from both operational and financial into the one single source of truth, which allows you to look at this information at a top level and overall, which enables people to see how this is going to impact not only the financial ability, but the strategic and operational items that the organisation is following. So because of the technology and the linkages between finance and supply chain, everybody can be on the same page, and that helps the organisation identify what's happening. So what are some of the benefits to the CFO? Well, it helps them with the steering of the ship because they're able to have an end-to-end picture of what's going on, not from a marketing all the way through to a sales perspective, and how that impacts on the operational costs. You can see farther and sooner, right? So this enables you to be able to look at saying, okay, what's happening with the marketing, or what's happening, sales might come in and say, we've been talking to this customer and we're going to have this huge order coming in, which is 10 times the normal, right? So and it is a firm order. So you've then got to go and say, okay, if we get this firm order and it's coming in and they want it delivered by Christmas, we are currently in November. So what do we need to have from a raw material perspective? What do we need to have from a production perspective? Or where do we need to have the goods produced? And if they're being produced overseas, how much is it going to be the air freight to get them here, because they won't get here by shipping time? So it allows you to have that actual impact and understanding across the organisation on not only the costs, but the benefits and also the risks the operations could have, because you might say, okay, we usually go to this supplier, they say they can't make our goods, where are you going to go? So you can think and look at what your different options are rather than waiting till the last moment, because you can see the impacts. Improve resiliency and agility, right? Because we are in an agile environment and everything is changing on a regular basis. So we need to be able to look at how we can improve how we're doing things. One of the stories about improving procedures was I give is there was a castle that had 5 turrets, of course the 4 on the corner and 1 in the middle. And basically one of the generals came and said, okay, we've got this guard standing on that middle turret at the front. What benefits is he providing to us as at the castle? And everybody says, well, he's always been there. And the general said, well, that's not a good enough answer. Why is he there? And they said, well, we don't know. He said, well, find out. So they actually went back and had a look at the history, and they found out that in the past, that particular guard's job was, when the general was riding in on his horse, he used to have to walk down the stairs, of course, get the horse, take it to the stable, feed it, clean it, and put it to bed, and then the next morning bring it out and have it there ready for the general to go away. And when the cars came, nobody actually thought to change his role. So he was still just standing there doing basically nothing. So in today's environment, with the changes that we're seeing all around us all the time, we should always be questioning which ways we can do things better and how we can improve. And that was not only just from a finance perspective, but it's also from an operations, from a planning perspective. So it impacts all areas of how we're doing things. It also enables us to manage the margins, because being able to see the integrated planning from end to end, you can actually see the impacts of something in the different areas. And you might say, okay, we're being able to do a ramp up of production. And by doing a ramp up of production, that's going to enable us to reduce our per unit cost, because we're actually producing more in that time frame. But it might still not be a benefit because of the other ongoing costs from electricity and other things that might not be providing impact. So it might reduce our margins, or we might be doing a major marketing thing which impacts the margin. So we need to actually understand the impacts of anything we're doing across the organisation. And when you're in a siloed environment, it's very hard to see that. While now with the integrated business plan linking all that, it's a lot easier to see that detail. You need to be able to leverage artificial intelligence. So some of the supply chain software out there today, for example, has the capability of looking at your history and saying which type of, whether it's a seasonal or what was the history, and then looking at, based on that, what's our forecast going forward, plus or minus a margin of error. So you can actually use a lot of different technology to enable you to help in that area. And also when you start looking at your stock levels. You can actually use artificial intelligence to say, okay, you're currently overstocked in this particular area and you're understocked in this area. Let's move stock with it in our organization first before actually buying it externally. Or based on our past sales, it might put out a warning and saying, you're saying you need a safety stock of 50, but based on our past experience and based on what it takes to actually get the stock in, we could actually reduce that safety stock to 10 and still not impact our reliability and impact our market perception, because we'll always be able to deliver the stock, because where in the past the stock might have taken a month and a half to get here, we've now been able, with better distribution networks and better delivery networks, to get that down to maybe 5 days, right? So therefore, the amount of safety stock you need to keep, it can be reduced. So you can actually use the intelligence to look at your stocking levels to ensure that you've got it. And also, as I said, if you've got an order coming from the customer, it can automatically work out, okay, this is how much of an order we need to place on the end supplier to make sure that we can, either raw materials or finished goods, to ensure we can actually meet those order for finished goods when it's required. The change in culture, that's one of the hardest things to actually have in an organization. So growth mindset it comes to mind, where you need to be always looking at trying to change things. And as I said, also from the example I gave with the castle, you need people to be able to look for doing things in a better way. And some organizations do that by giving encouragement or awards for the best idea of the month or something like that, to encourage people to see, oh, the company is looking for ways to do things better. They're not just saying it, right? Because some companies say it and then people say, well, I put up this idea or this idea and we never heard anything of it, right? So you need to actually put in place a way to encourage people to look for change culture, to ensure that people are trying to see the best ways to do things, because somebody doing the job for a number of years might think, oh, if I was able to do A, B, and C rather than D, C, E, I might actually be able to improve the efficiency of doing this and reduce costs and whatever, right? So you need people close to the product sometimes to give you ideas on how to improve the production, or even just within an organization, you might find somebody who says, oh, I've been walking around this area and I can see there's a whole lot of the old fluoro lights. We should really change those to LED lights to actually reduce our energy costs and improve our efficiencies in that area. So there's basically lots of, you've got to actually encourage people to have a change culture, because a lot of people do usually resist change. The other thing is technology. In the past, technology was very inflexible, and now it's getting more and more flexible and able to help organizations improve how they're doing things, and excuse me, and also give the ability to grow with them. So some people can buy software which is very for 3 or 4 users, and then as the organization expands, they can just add on the extra users, which actually makes it grow with the organization as it gets more proficient. And of course, embrace the final thing is embracing the finance forward supply chain planning, or IBP, from an overall perspective, because not only does it give you the benefit of extra views into the data, and as Gina Rometty, who was the CEO of IBM, said, data is the new gold, right? So you've got to be able to mine that data and get into the data. And by linking the finance and supply chain data, you're able to actually get into it and understand the different drivers. You're able to understand the flow-on effects. You're able to then link that with IBP to marketing and sales to see how that integrates with both the finance and the supply chain. And it enables the organization to have a true overview of everything that's going on and the strategic and operational and IT impacts that need to be considered. So from an integrated business, it allows you to connect the strategy from the C-suite to the finance and operations, and the end result is the drive of profitability growth. And you do that by having comprehensive enterprise plans, using predictions to help you understand where you're going. So you can actually, because you've got everything linked, you can then use the drivers that you have found to help you do predictive forecasting, which means that you can then still have the necessary finance and operational people review that data to see if they need to make any fine tuning of it, or whether they might say, okay, the predictive analysis of sales is coming a bit higher than we're expecting based on our knowledge. So we might need to try and say, okay, we have to adjust that slowly down. Or you might say, predictive analysis is saying this based on the previous seasonal factors, but we do know that we have got a new launch and we know that this is going to actually, the extra marketing is actually going to increase the sales by an extra 10%. So you can actually put that into the necessary supply chain tool, which will then flow on and say that's how it's going to impact your financial plans and operation. So that gives you the ability to have a real-time impact of the assessments. So you can then see if something changes in area A, how that flows on the period B, and what's the different operational impacts that's going to have. And that allows you to make strategic decisions on as they occur, rather than waiting for doing things as a retro and trying to do recovery. You can actually be predictive rather than reactive. And that's always better for a business, because the more predictive you are, the better you will be perceived in the market and the better you'll be able to achieve your results. And of course, as I said earlier, the combination of these all help you increase your resilience and your decision making, because the more data you can see from an end-to-end perspective and understand the impacts one area has on the other, allows the operation to communicate with each other more realistically, and people will actually value that, because they will actually say we're being included in what's happening within the organization, rather than being kept under a mushroom and trying to understand what we need to achieve to meet the strategic goals, but not being included in any of the plans or discussions. Thereby, as I say, it enables alignment, collaboration, accountability across the organization, which enables everybody to see what's been going on, how it's going on.
Hello, I just want to confirm, is it just me or are you all also having some issues? I couldn't hear Ralph. Kathleen, and
I believe Ralph dropped off. I believe Ralph his connection cut off.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, thank you. And I can see, thank you very much, Abby and the, yeah. So we'll have to wait for Ralph to come back. And thank you for David. Once Ralph is back, I will ask him your question. Sorry about the technical issue. I'm sure you all are familiar with that now, with all the Zoom and all the webinars.
Yeah, I believe Ralph is trying to reconnect. So I see a question from David, and I want to take a stab at answering that. Of course, while we wait for Ralph to come back, and I believe Ralph has almost reached the end of his presentation anyway, so that's the good part. And David, to answer your question, yeah, how does IBP differ from a proper application of traditional S&OP? Is it mainly down to the existence of an overarching software solution, incorporating AI and modeling the impacts of input changes in terms of the financial impact on the organization? So yeah, part of the answer is yes. We believe that traditionally the technology did not exist where you know, we couldn't put all that information and we couldn't have a workflow within the same piece of software. So but we believe that with the right solution, and if you are on the lookout for one, you should look out for a solution where all the information, even operational data, not just financial data, is can be housed, can be stored and accessed from a single source of truth. So it does help with the elimination of data duplication and also having different silos where operations and finance are working separately in trying to achieve the same strategic goals. So in terms of incorporating AI and the modeling, trying to react to change, yes, I think the software that really is just the icing on the cake, really, and we want to predominantly the software would help to enable better insights, whether it's taking data from a financial source directly or connecting to any other operational source that you have. So I mean, yeah, the AI part is really icing on the cake for us. So does that answer? Hopefully, does that answer the question, David? Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. And I can see Ralph is back. Ralph, can you try to see if you can share the presentation? Oh, he's gone again. So, and we got another question. So, Dean, will you be able to answer Andy's question? His question is, what is a typical software used for IBP?
Yeah, a typical software used for IBP. Okay, without trying to, I mean, we would say that our software, CCH Tagetik, our software would be able to provide most of that, the functionalities that we described and a bit more, right? So, I mean, I'm trying to humble brag, but yes, that we would be an example. I mean, traditionally, you would also look at disparate solutions that could answer certain pieces of that. But we believe we are taking a different approach where we have ideally all the information within a single source of truth. So other software that you can consider, I mean, in the market would be some of the bigger, more complex players, maybe SAP, it could be Oracle software, right, where they have different pieces of software that would achieve a combination of those things. Yeah. Does that answer the question, Andy?
Thanks, Dean. And Ralph, are you able to connect back? I can see you are sharing the presentation. We can see that. Can you also try your mic? You can unmute. Just now, Dean was trying to answer some of the questions while we're waiting you to come back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
It's okay. You can go on. You can start the presentation.
Well, yeah, so basically I'm nearly finished and then I was going to go over to questions. So as I was saying, oops. Basically, you've got all the data in the one place, as I think Dean was also saying, where we can get the information from all the different places, both internal and external. And also, because we're connecting all the different information, it allows you to basically have instant decision making. So people can actually walk into a meeting and the people can talk about things, and those changes can be impacted on the system straight away, and you can see what the ramifications are. So you can actually have a very detailed planning meeting with people from the different divisions, and everybody can be around the same. One person can be entering the data and they can say, okay, we're going to do this marketing. You can then see what the impact's going to be on the sales, and then people can say, okay, that's going to impact this on our costs, et cetera, et cetera. So you can actually see the flow on impacts and have a true overall look at the performance of the organization based on what's happening. And because of that, it allows you to have an accelerated response time, because you can see that, for example, we're having a bit of a dip in sales in, say, first quarter next year. Well, that means we now need to have a marketing plan, or we need to go up and do some specials, or look, we're going to be overstocked in this particular product. Well, let's go out and see if we can get some sales in this area by putting a discount on it or whatever. But because you've got all the data interrelated and interlinked, it enables the organization to make better strategic decisions from not only a overall company perspective, but also from an operational and IT perspective. So that's where this all helps you with the organization's profitability and how they're going to achieve their goals. So that was where I was, and I was sorry that I dropped out just right near the end. So we've got some time for some questions. Otherwise, I've got some other examples that I should be able to give.
Any other questions from the audience? You can either put in the chat or you can put in the Q&A box. Yeah, I can see another one from David. Ralph, can you see the Q&A box at the bottom? There is a question, and it's actually a question for Dean. So I'm not sure if Dean you would like to answer, or Ralph you can answer for Dean.
I can answer that one. Basically, our software. The question is, can your software possibly be as good as Excel, well, with or without their favorite tool? So basically, the way that our tool works is that it enriches Excel. So we are not replacing Excel, but what we're enabling people to do is, rather than relying on Excel to do calculations, or Excel to do forecasting or consolidation of the different products, our tool allows all that data to be loaded from your mainframe, from a supply chain perspective, and also from your financial perspective, and even HR. So you've got all your operational data at a granular level in the system, which will then be rolled up to the relevant items. So for example, you can see the information, and you can link it down to the drill down to the information in Excel or in a web basis. So our tool allows you to use Excel to read and write to, but it also links into Word and PowerPoint, which enables you to build reports in your Word document or your Excel presentation, your PowerPoint presentation, and not have to copy and paste data in there. You can link directly into the database. So Excel is still very much around and used, but it's used more to retrieve data rather than trying to do the grunt work, which the system will do for them.
Yeah, and I couldn't have said it better myself, David. That's a really good question. We're not out here to try to change the way that finance or even operations is used to working in spreadsheets, right? We want to enhance that, as Ralph said, and introduce a workflow in there, and really have a common repository for data. That's the goal over here. Like, we want to centralize and really enhance your experience to what you're already familiar with. We don't want to take that away from you. So yeah.
Yeah, and on top of that, like if you're thinking about doing a marketing at an individual or a product family level, right, and trying to incorporate how that marketing is going to increase the sales over this is going to have a 5% or 10% increase over a number across all the products, and then in that family, and trying to do that in Excel, and then trying to see the flow and effect on the production plan or on your stock requirements or whatever. It's extremely difficult in Excel to do that, while our tool has all that linkages in it, and enables everybody to save time by actually looking at the information rather than trying to make sure everything's correct in the spreadsheet. Does that answer your question, David? All right, is there any other questions? Okay. Some of the other things that people can consider is that with an integrated business plan, you also have got the capability, as I was saying, we have seen some of the companies using it to help them with their overall organisation and how they're going. So for example, one of our clients produces a lot of information for a lot of products for Bunnings, right? So being able to understand the ramifications of the last few years with COVID and how that's impacted their numbers, where their sales have gone up dramatically because a lot more people haven't been able to travel, so they've been doing stuff around the house, so they've needed more tools and other information. So being able to take that into their supply chain and understand where they need to get the stock to and how they need to get the stock to and what they need to order has been quite critical to them growing quite significantly over the COVID period. So being able to link that into their financials and understanding how that flows through has been very critical to them growing. So companies are using this information, and more companies are going down this path because they can see the benefits of being able to understand how things are. Okay, how things are being done. And David has come back again with another question, some case history to show the beneficial impacts. And that's what one of these is ones that I'm doing at the moment, where, as I say, they've actually seen the beneficial impact of being able to not only meet the deliveries that they due to the increased demand, but also look at ways to change and become more efficient in obtaining the products because they've got that true end-to-end view. We've also got another company which has been doing some extra marketing, and they've actually seen by being able to track the marketing expenditure and then track how they've actually been able to go against that, whether they've achieved those objectives that were set out in the marketing plan. So there is case studies where the companies have actually seen a huge impact of doing the supply chain and then flowing it through to their planning and forecasting modules to understand what the flow-on ramifications are as an organisation. But that's where the benefit is, like being able to see that true end-to-end picture is quite critical in today's environment, as well as with things changing quite dramatically on an overall perspective, not only from an inflation flowing through, but you've also got the issues with trying to get the right level of staffing, and also even from a capital expenditure perspective, trying to make sure that you can obtain the funding, right? Because a lot of companies are now being required to do ESG reporting to get that funding. So it all ties together that having the true end-to-end picture enables organisation to get to their strategic and operational results.
Yeah, and just to add to that, yes, we do have use cases of local, customers that have benefited. I mean, indirectly or directly, right? Either you get better, you can cut down on the amount of inventory that you have, or you can also possibly cut down on the amount of time you need to, create the forecast and all that. So all those benefits, yeah, we can see that in some of our actual real clients, and we'll be happy to share that. We happy to extend the conversation, take this offline, and we can definitely want to show you what we have and who has benefited from that. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. One of the other questions that we have been asked is how easy is it to get data into the system, especially into our system? I can't talk about other ones, but basically we are, if you are on SAP HANA, we are one of the few products that are certified to operate with SAP HANA. So that enables us to link in very easily to the data to provide drill down. But we are able to create linkages via APIs or just get data in text formats or CSV format from any other system that's out there. We can also link into external sources, and we can have data loaded from spreadsheets. So as Dean was saying a bit earlier, we actually have a workflow capability in our tool, so you can actually track where things are and who's required to do them, send out emails if it's getting close to a deadline, and also understand from an audit perspective who actually made the change and when that change was made, which helps improve things. So, for example, some companies have been able to increase their, or reduce, as Dean was saying, reduce their forecasts from 3 days down to a few hours, and which means that they can then focus on understanding where the numbers have come and do their analysis to become trusted business advisors, rather than spending all the time trying to get the information in the spreadsheets. Okay. Andy has asked Dean if he can share the case studies as he mentioned, and Dean's going to maybe we can send something out after this to.
Absolutely. Happy to connect with you, Andy, and also David, to definitely share about the case studies and when real life scenarios of how our customers have benefited from our product. So Yes.
What I might, as we're talking a little bit about our product, I might just give a quick few minutes on the product, just to show you. So just give me a minute while I launch it and show you something that the tool can do. So share screen. There. So this is basically, I'm going to close this. Sorry. How do I get that? There we are. Close that. So this is basically one of our, you got your dashboards, and you can actually put as many, this is a self, and where you can actually put different linkages to it. So you could actually have links to the reports across the top, and this shows you the different modules. So you got the sales, demand, supply chain, production, MRP, procurement, finance. So in the supply chain, for example, you've got your alerts for exceptions, your inventory status, your inventory plan, your replenishment, right? And you've got your planning records, where you can actually go down to, in this one, we're going down by region and we're going down by warehouse. So this one has got one warehouse, and then you've got it by the different type groupings of products. So we're going to look down here at dining, and then we'll look at a table. So you can drill down into the individual product. Just see if this is a good one. Yeah. So this one basically is showing you that for this particular farmhouse table, which is Birchwood, and it's basically, this is the up until here is the history. So it's actually showing you what you've been, how you've been going, and the red line is the average, right? And then this is the forecast, which is based on an AI technology. And as you can see, the AI selection in the middle here, and it's saying it's using seasonal, right? So it's saying that there, and you've also got the ability to look at where you've got outliers and get rid of them, but I'm not going to go into that at the moment. Then down below it, you've got the capability of saying this is what your starting value is, and here's where you've got your forecast. It's coming from the sales team. And here you can actually put overrides, right? Where you think what's going to happen. And then you can also go down here and see your inventory levels. You've got what's on hand, what's on order, what's your reorder level, and quantity ordered, and your safety stock, right? And you can actually see when the orders are and when the next lot of orders have to be to make sure you can deliver the stock. And also down the bottom, it actually shows you all the different areas that are involved in getting out to your end of your plant, and also showing out your stock out list. So that gives you a very quick idea. And then if we were to go up here to demand planning and go to demand forecast and go to demand forecast and go to APAC, down to warehouse, go down to dining, table, and then, so this is where you can look at the same product from a demand perspective. Okay. And basically, you can see what it's very similar, and you can change the information from down here, saying, okay, we've got from a demand, we actually normally get it from our Atlanta plant, but we actually have got some ability to transfer it internally from stocks from other warehouses. Like they've only got 3 days on hand, they've got 29 days on hand, right? So you might say, okay, we actually want to move some from there, and that's got a lead time of 7 days, while getting it from this place, there's a lead time of 62. So this is where you can actually link it all the way through and understand how things go from an overall perspective. And then you can also look at the workflow again to see, of course, you've got the green line under here, which tells you you're only 50% complete. So there's a very quick overview. We've only got 5 minutes left. I was just wondering, is there any other questions that we need to answer before I hand it back? Dean, have you got anything else you'd like to add? I don't know. I could keep going inside the tool, but I don't.
No, thanks, Ralph. That was a good flavor of what our software can do. But of course, there's so much more to show, and we are very happy to for the sessions outside of this, if that is desired. And really thank everyone for your attention today. And we hope this was beneficial to everyone in some way. Right. And so, yeah, I think that's it from us.
That's it from us. Like there's only 3 minutes left to go. How would you like? Would you like us to keep coming up with some other topics? What would you like us to do?
I think we can wrap up today's webinar, and thank you so much for everyone attending. And Dean and Ralph will follow up with you, Andy, and share case studies with you. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. And if you don't have Ralph's contact information, you can always contact me. I'm Heidi Chow. You can always contact inquiries@asci.org.au, and we'll be able to transfer your questions to Ralph and Dean. And thank you again for attending, and thank you Dean and Ralph for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for attending. Bye.
Bye.